and it's actually probably one of the most basic questions. That's an excellent question. So one way of thinking about the difference between 0 and 1 is, if you think about it in binary code, something's here, something's not here. And to some degree, that question has been one of the basic questions of world religions since people have started thinking about things. Like, how do you get from nothing to there being something here? And it's an incredibly profound question, and different religions have come up with different sort of ways of thinking about that. And I think that particular question underlies, what has been what seems to me to be part of what I have been doing since I've been doing stuff, is how things change. And because the question of how things are, how they come to be, is very similar in some ways to the question of how things change. Because, you think about Zeno's paradox, where you have, you can't possibly get anywhere, because in order to get somewhere, you have to get halfway first, and in order to get, between the difference between halfway and all the way, you have to get halfway between there. So it's all asymptotic, and you never actually get there, right? Because you're just always having to cover half the distance first. But the reality is you do, right? You are able to take a step. You are able to make change. Things do happen where they hadn't happened before. So it's actually a very profound question to then ask, so how does that work? And that's partially where, I think about that whole idea of the primal connection is maybe the idea that 0 and 1 were initially separate in the first place is false. Maybe they were always connected. And, another way to think about it is sort of with a yin-yang, that any aspect of something has within it its lack of existence. And that there's this sort of interplay between existence and not existing. And then if you think about quantum physics, right, you get that same question. Is it possible to both exist and not exist at the same time? And in quantum physics, yeah, you can. And that, part of the process of the difference between existing and not existing is that process of observation or information or consciousness or something that's interacting with this state, which is in both places at the same time. So to me, that's been just an incredibly profound sort of underlying ideas that that have been sort of running around with me for decades, but also particularly coming to the fore in the last few months of just this idea of maybe existence and lack of existence are inherently connected, are connected in a very primal way, and that it's easier to get from something being there to something not being there than you might think if you can find those places where the connection occurs.
Yeah. So it's kind of bringing in. It's like Big Bang Theory, Genesis.
Yeah, all that stuff.
All that stuff. Okay, and because I know it's something I've often thought about is if 0 is nothing and 1 is a whole, where's the middle?
Right. Right. And so one place of what's in the middle is fractals, for instance. That this is something where when people discuss fractals, they say, it's got a fractional dimension. Maybe it's 1.3, or maybe it's 1.2, or maybe it's 0.63. And when you first start thinking about that, it's how can you possibly have a fractional dimension? That's ridiculous. But yet you can design this whole form of mathematics that deals with this as a perfectly reasonable concept, and then you can get trees, and you can get mountains, and you can get clouds, and you can get all of these things that sort of exist in reality, whether or not you can quite understand how you can get there using fractional dimensions. Which is why I think the fractal is such an incredibly important part of any kind of thinking that you might have about how the universe works, is because the universe works, and it works with fractals. And it also works with transcendental constants. It works with pi, and it works with E, and it works with all of these other sorts of things that are irrational. You know, how is it possible that you can create all of these wonderful structures in the universe that are on numbers that you do not understand at all? You know, you cannot get to the end of pi. You cannot get to the end of E. You can't really say they're anything other than what they are. I mean, you can get close with fractions, but you know, they're inherently irrational. So these very important structures in natural systems that people can't exactly wrap their minds around. And you know, and another way of thinking about it too is if you think about white light, right? Which, you know, you're in a place where light is all around you. It sort of feels like it's not really there. You can see through it, but yet it has all the wavelengths of all of everything else in it. So it's almost like white feels like 0, and black feels like 1. But white actually has all of the aspects of color inside of it as well. So, you know, or if you think about white noise, where there's, it sounds like nothing, but yet it has within it all the...
That's everything.
Right. It has all the formula. It has all of, maybe not all, but it has all kinds of different frequencies of things. And if you actually perform Fourier transforms on the white noise, you could see, you know, well, actually it's this oscillator combined with this oscillator over here, combined with this oscillator, and structures that look like they have nothing in them actually have a tremendous amount in them. And I think that that's sort of true for many, if not all, of the times that we think we're seeing nothing.
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually have always thought of black as 0 and white as 1, like a little a reverse, just because to me I'm like black is the absence of everything,
right?
Whereas white is,
and both are probably true.
Yeah, it's an opposite interpretation because you know I've also heard people say it's like no, white's the absence of everything and black's I was like
yeah. So but, and it's again it's and black, you know, if it has nothing, but yet again it has all the frequencies combined as well. So it's.
This is where and I like that it's this idea that everybody, I like this idea too that everyone can kind of have their own definition of it. It's literally trying to define the gray area. Yeah. Because whichever way the gradient goes, it's going to be gray in the middle. Right.
And you know, our reality of the way we experience the world is that very few things are actually either white or black, and then there's almost everything is somewhere in the middle. But yet it's easy to sort of see the world as it's either this or this. You know, it's almost as if the dichotomies that we put on it, whether it's existence or lack of existence or black and white and all of those things, are filters of our perception because it makes us more comfortable to think that way rather than actual representations of reality.
And how does this giant concept apply? How do you what do you pull from it to apply to what you do, in the body work?
It's some of that idea of, you know, the potential to go anywhere exists in any place. So, you know, in Reiki we say, well, you can reach any part of the body from any other part of the body, which is, you know, part of just the whole way that the body is structured. But it is kind of that concept of, you know, if there is a particular thing happening in the body, and the body wants to go somewhere else, and maybe it seems like it should rationally be impossible for it to get there, but maybe within its structure of where it is in the present, it has the ability to get where it wants to get. So it's not just an idea of, you know, seeing a sort of an unlimited potential, but it is also again, that aspect to me which keeps coming up of connection, that it's almost like you find that place where one reality wants to get to another reality, and it's already there because that connection is already existing, and that there's a potential. It's like you find that path tendril goes off in a particular direction, and it makes sense because it's almost like the seed of that ability to be in a different place is already present in where it is at that moment.